You're watching CW Montana. This is the MTN 9 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us midweek. I'm Jeanelle Slade. Tonight across the state, Montana firefighters emerge heroes for a four-legged friend. We take you to the life-saving rescue. The Montana Invasive Species Council debates everything from invasive mussels to feral swine. We'll have those details in a bit. But first, $80 million in Montana infrastructure projects may not move forward. Well, last year, the legislature approved the sale of state bonds for the first time in many years to finance $80 million in big projects. But now the governor's office says a disputed financial audit is putting those projects in jeopardy. MTN's Mike Dennison has the story.
The state planned to sell the $80 million in bonds to investors last November and use the money to finance scores of projects across the state, like water and sewer and bridge projects and renovating Romney Hall on the MSU campus or a new college dental clinic in Great Falls. But an obscure state office, the Legislative Audit Division, has said the state can't sell bonds unless it tells investors it might have to repay $130 million in Medicaid money to the federal government. The division bases that opinion on a financial audit of Medicaid, which provides government-funded medical coverage to 275,000 low-income Montanans. One problem, however, officials in the governor's office say the audit is wrong.
We think it's bad methodology, a series of questionable decisions, but it does stand in the way, and that as we go farther towards the construction season, the entire construction season could be at risk if we don't move quickly on bonding.
The audit division says the state may have made mistakes in determining who's eligible for Medicaid and thus the possible repayment. State health officials say the audit division is the one who made mistakes.
We know that many of the cases called into question were in fact determined eligible appropriately.
Legislative Auditor Angus McKeever says he can't comment while the audit and review are ongoing. So what happens now? The governor's office says it's exploring other options to finance the projects, but that whatever happens, it will cost the state more money. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
And Mike tells us state legislators in charge of the audit division will be in Helena next week for a series of meetings and will address the issue in some manner. Well, can local law officers in Montana detain someone at the request of federal immigration officials? That question now before the Montana Supreme Court, which heard arguments today on the case out of Lincoln County. The Lincoln County Sheriff's Office in Libby arrested Augustine Ramon for burglary, but he wasn't allowed to post bail because federal immigration officials asked Lincoln County to hold him. Now, Ramon later pleaded guilty and then was handed over to federal officials and deported to France. The ACLU sued on his behalf, saying Montana law doesn't allow detention of people solely at the request of federal immigration officers. In court today, a U.S. Justice Department lawyer said federal law allows the detention, but under questioning by Justice Dirk Sandifer, an attorney for Montana counties conceded there's no such authority in state law.
What legal authority is the county standing on to say we can continue to hold these people pursuant to this detainer request after the state law authority for continuing to incarcerate them disappears?
There are many reasons to hold somebody. This is simply a voluntary, there's no statute that says, although the legislature could remedy that, there's no statute that says you get to hold these people on immigration detainers for the federal government. There's no statute like that.
Now, the Montana Supreme Court will now make a decision. Well, a state biologist considered delisting Canyon Ferry Reservoir from having invasive mussels. They're asking the public to weigh in. Zebra mussel larvae was detected in 2016, labeling the lake suspect for invasive mussels. Aquatic Invasive Species Bureau Chief Thomas Wolf says after 3 years of aggressive detection, no further evidence of mussels has been found. Now, if Canyon Ferry is delisted, there will be a reduction in check stations at Canyon Ferry, and boats will no longer undergo exit inspections. Fish, Wildlife and Parks now wants to know how the public feels about that before it releases a decision and boating season gets started. Now, the Montana Invasive Species Council also met in Helena to discuss the threat of feral swine. Officials from the Department of Livestock warn that pigs can be an incredibly destructive predatory species. with the ability to impact both rural and urban areas. Now, feral swine have yet to be spotted in Montana, but have been seen as close as 5 miles on the Saskatchewan side of the Canadian border. Training state personnel and raising public awareness are top priorities, as well as creating a coordinated response plan for swine sightings by both agencies. Officials say the interest from the public has been great.
You know, what can they do? What are the rules pertaining to feral swine? Why should we be concerned? And so it's been really refreshing, and I think it's really helped kind of drive a lot of the progress forward on this issue. So we're going to try and continue to capitalize on that.
Now, people are encouraged to report any suspected feral swine immediately by calling the 24-hour toll-free Squeal on Pigs hotline. Well, authorities tonight trying to figure out how a body found partially concealed ended up behind the Park City Post Office this morning. Local and state investigators now calling it a suspicious death. Park County Sheriff's deputies responded a little after 7 o'clock this morning. Sheriff Charles Kemp says the deceased Caucasian man is between 45 and 55 years old. The sheriff, however, has not released any information on the victim's name or possible suspects. He did, however, say there is not a threat to public safety. Now, Kemp says the Department of Criminal Investigation will assist with the case until the cause and manner of death is confirmed. Now, the sheriff's spokesperson says an autopsy will take place tomorrow afternoon and more information may be available at that time. An Anaconda man now sentenced to life in prison for the 2018 murder of his landlord. Troy Johnson sentenced to deliberate homicide in connection with the May 15th beating death of Shelley Schaefer in her Anaconda home. Johnson will not be eligible for parole for at least 30 years. Hemp crops, they continue to grow dollars across the state. So this week, Montana hemp growers and processors gathered in Great Falls to learn the latest. Here's Jennifer Hausman with tonight's Montana Ag feature.
Whether it's food, CBD oil, or fiber from the stalk, the uses for hemp have expanded and Montana is reaping the reward. Montana Farmers Union President Walter Schweitzer says they have seen a huge increase in production over the last 2 seasons.
Last year we grew about 20,000 acres, and this season we grew over 40,000. And, nationally, hemp was only made legal about a year ago.
Kim Phillips, founder of Planet Hemp, started growing her own hemp in Montana in 2016, but says there's more that needs to be done in terms of production options.
There's a big disconnect in the infrastructure. Right. You have lots of growers, fabulous farmers here that are growing, tens of thousands of acres have been grown in Montana, and that's fabulous. But if it can't get into the walls or cycle of industry that it's intended for, it doesn't do us any good sitting out in the field.
And Schweitzer agrees.
The infrastructure hasn't caught up yet. And, back in the 40s, farmers were required to grow hemp. It was a stable crop.
As the crop is still relatively new in Montana, there's been a learning curve all around, which is why networking within the state is so important.
And, it's a good opportunity because farmers learn from farmers. And, there's a lot of people out here that claim to be hemp experts, but what I've learned is nobody is a hemp expert when it comes to growing it in the field. And the farmers are learning, and we need to share those experiences.
It's really important that we get it right from the get-go and not discourage people from its potential.
The Montana Department of Agriculture is also trying to keep up with the ever-changing industry, according to Hemp Program Coordinator Andy Gray.
We strive to keep the most up-to-date information as possible on our website.
Gray also says because hemp is a new territory for Montana, there's plenty of room to grow, literally.
It's an ever-changing program, and it will continue to be that way probably for the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
With your Montana Ag Report in Great Falls, I'm Jennifer Hausman.
Thanks, Jennifer. Marion firefighters and Flathead County Animal Control jumped to the rescue Monday night to save a horse that broke through the ice and became stranded in a swampy canal. Now, firefighters tell us the rescue mission took more than 20 volunteers and close to 7 hours to complete. Henry the horse suffered from severe fatigue, dehydration, and hypothermia. The horse stayed overnight in the fire hall Monday and received warm fluids. Firefighters braved the freezing cold water for hours to make sure Henry survived.
We had to break a lot of ice and some dirt to get to him, and then his front legs kept kind of going under the ice. We finally got the front part of his body out, and then his rear legs would go underneath the ice buildup. So we kind of had to build a bridge across and lift him straight up.
And we are happy to tell you that Henry is making a full recovery at a veterinarian clinic in Kalispell. Well, a Montana hound dog with a survivor's heart is getting a second chance after he was shot in the shoulder and the bullet exited through his neck. This is Amos. Stafford Animal Shelter in Livingston tells us their rescue partners, Help Every Pet of Hardin, found Amos on death's door. Shelter staff say Amos, sometimes calling himself Famous Amos, was severely underweight and malnourished. Since then, he's recovering nicely and as of today is officially adoptable.
He's ready to go. We're putting a little weight on him slowly, and he'll be a really good pet for somebody, especially a hound lover.
It's so rewarding to see these guys come in having had hard luck and just people coming together to get them into a happy home.
Now, the shelter ensures Amos is good with all people of all ages, even other dogs. He just needs special attention and care as he recovers. Still to come on the 9 o'clock news, a special lesson plan delivered to Billings students today as Montana's governor shares his thoughts on political civility. But first, what's the weather looking like, Bob?
Well, Jeanelle, it was a beautiful day across Montana. We had a lot of temperatures into the 50s east of the divide. Out in the west, well, we had a few cloudy skies out there, but I tell you what, the big story is cold Arctic air, some of the coldest air of the season coming our way from this place up in Canada. We'll have more about that after the break.